Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, ring the bell. All schools are back next week if they want to be, but it will look a little different. Open windows, student rosters and more masks. Chris Hipkins joins us and we talk to a school and parents. The Prime Minister's super short visit to the super city. Hundreds of police officers are working at COVID checkpoints. How long can that last and who's plugging the gaps? A new Plymouth school community is reeling after 4 people are killed in a crash. It's called retail therapy for a reason. Some Aucklanders hit the actual shops after a 3-month enforced hiatus. And the Black Caps get a chance to avenge that World Cup.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. 3 months of Auckland school children learning online are coming to an end. From next Wednesday, all of the region's schools and kura will fully reopen, although attendance at primaries and intermediates will be limited. That means younger pupils are not likely to be physically at school every day. Auckland mother Rachel says the quality of her 2 children's learning has been inconsistent at home.
I think it's a struggle when you have 2 working parents and kids to try to find a way to balance helping your kids with their school and also doing your work. I think they miss their friends, they miss their teachers, they miss being in the classroom, so anything we can do to get them back there safely is fine with us.
However, the Māori Development Minister says he's hugely concerned about kura reopening, considering Māori make up about 40% of cases in the Delta outbreak. Willie Jackson says it has to happen, but he's worried.
We're concerned, absolutely, but hugely concerned. But I work very closely with our people at the coalface, particularly in South Auckland, which is probably the most affected area. So there's a real, I don't know if it's enthusiasm, but there's a view that we have to get back to normality. But there's a lot of worries there. Children
from year 4 up will need to wear a mask. The Director General of Health says there's nothing to suggest there are problems with the clinical assessment of people with COVID-19 who died while isolating at home. A man in his 60s who had the virus and was isolating at home in the Auckland suburb of Glen Eden has died. The cause of death will be determined by the coroner, as will the cause of 2 other deaths in similar circumstances this month. Ashley Bloomfield says there will be thorough investigations.
We look very carefully at any opportunity to improve both the initial assessment and allocation of someone and also how the system is working. We are, of course, using pulse oximeters where people will be monitored because some people can deteriorate quite quickly even if they have a history of being well and are well at the time.
The AstraZeneca vaccine will be available later this month for a small number of people aged 18 and over who can't have the Pfizer shots for medical reasons. Dr. Bloomfield says people who are required to be vaccinated under the public health order but who prefer AstraZeneca to Pfizer can also opt for it. He says only a few hundred will be eligible. 148 new cases of the coronavirus have been reported today, all in Auckland, except 2 in Northland and 14 in Waikato King Country. 10 of the latter are in Otorohanga, 3 of the others are in Hamilton, and 1 is in Ngaruawahia. The Professional Firefighters Union is warning the COVID vaccination mandate will affect call-outs. Fire and Emergency is requiring 13,000 staff or volunteers to be vaccinated after next Monday. The union's National Secretary, Watty Watson, says this may keep 10% of them off the front line and unable to attend car crashes and fires.
This is the crisis as of midnight on the 15th of November because FENS, in our view, will not be able to maintain the current level of response due to the number of firefighters, both career and volunteer, that are either unvaccinated or their vaccination status is not known.
The union is asking the government for a temporary mandate exception. Tuvalu's foreign minister has delivered an address to the COP26 summit standing knee-deep in seawater, dressed in a suit and tie. Where Simon Kofe was standing used to be dry land. The message about rising seas caused by global warming has already gone viral.
We are sinking, so we thought that we would demonstrate that in a video so that people have an image to look at. So we've been very pleased with the reaction of the public.
Tuvalu's highest point is just 4.5 metres above sea level. It's 4 minutes past 5. England are playing down the favourites tag ahead of their T20 Cricket World Cup semi-final against New Zealand in Abu Dhabi tonight. The 2010 champions topped their group while the Black Caps finished second in theirs, both winning 4 matches and losing 1. But Owen Morgan's side have suffered a major blow, losing opener Jason Roy to a serious calf injury. Black Caps pace bowler Trent Boult is confident New Zealand can advance to the final.
Full of match winners, very well balanced and playing some very good white ball cricket at the moment. So let's hope we can create a big upset. There's been some good history over between the two sides over the last wee while with white ball cricket. So I'm sure there's a lot of people back home watching this one with interest.
The Black Caps will have some extra support in the stands with the All Whites there to cheer them on. The New Zealand men's football team have assembled in Abu Dhabi ahead of matches against Algeria and Gambia. Joseph Parker's trainer, Andy Lee, feels the New Zealand heavyweight will be in better shape when he takes on Derek Chisora in their rematch in Manchester next month. The pair went the whole 12 rounds in their last bout in May, which Parker won on a split decision. Lee, who had only just started working with him before that fight, says they've come a long way since.
It just wasn't enough time to affect any change or to embed any habits or, instincts that we've been trying to work on. But this time Joe has a greater understanding of what we're trying to do.
And that's the news.
Police assume people's online identities.
I don't think that a lot of particularly young people, when they'd be signing this, would understand they're never going to get back that information.
Lockdown blues make way for retail therapy.
Been saving up for some shoes since like 10 years ago. I reckon I'll get no sleep at all. I reckon I'll stay up all night.
And our smallest bird finds a strange nest.
It just was so traumatic trying to unzip this trap while there was a tiny little nest inside of it.
All things big and small. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday for Northland. Generally fine, isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and the Tararua District. Fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. Isolated showers inland during the afternoons and evenings. Thunderstorms possible east of Tauranga and downpours possible for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay today. For Auckland to Wellington, also Wairarapa excluding the Tararua district. Fine apart from areas of cloud this evening, isolated showers developing tomorrow afternoon. For Nelson, Marlborough and Buller to Fiordland, mostly cloudy, patchy light rain or drizzle this evening and showers developing tomorrow. For Canterbury, mostly cloudy with fine breaks, isolated showers developing inland during the afternoons. Southland and Otago, often cloudy with isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings. And Chatham Islands, cloudy with occasional drizzle. It's 5:07.
Kia ora rā e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ring the bell, school is back in theory at least. The government's announced all primary school students in Auckland and Waikato can return to the classroom next Wednesday, just maybe not all at the same time. Auckland students in years 1 to 10 have been learning from home during the 13-week lockdown. Major changes to the national curriculum and assessment programs are also being delayed or scaled down so schools can concentrate on getting students and staff back into face-to-face learning. In other updates, there's 147 new community COVID cases today. 81 people are in hospital and a person in home isolation has died. Education and COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins acknowledges it won't exactly be situation normal next week.
It'll look different in schooling context. So we have allowed schools a bit of flexibility to work out what's going to be best for their school and for their school community, recognising that some schools are absolutely packed in and therefore they're likely to have smaller numbers of students back in order to maintain the distancing and the spacing and keep group sizes small. Other schools will have a bit more flexibility because if they're smaller schools, they've got a lot more space, then they may be able to do more. And so we did want to make sure we're leaving that flexibility so schools can make pragmatic decisions there.
So do you anticipate, though, some kids will only be back at school two, maybe 3 days a week?
That's right, and I think that will certainly be the case for a number of kids, at least initially.
In terms of actual physical building, ventilation, is that just opening windows or something else?
Yeah, by and large, it will be opening windows. Most of our schools are not built with built-in air conditioning systems. Their air conditioning system is the doors and windows, and so they'll be encouraged to have those open. Where schools have a built-in air conditioning system, then obviously we'll be working with them. Or where they have, where they can't open the doors and windows, or where there's other air quality issues, then of course we'll work with them on those.
So the responsibility really is on the schools to set out the plan, right? And not everybody is going to turn up to class, even if class is available. So how tough do you reckon it's going to be to straddle these two worlds of continuing online learning and in-person learning?
I think we have to acknowledge that it's going to be a bit bumpy between now and the end of the year. One of the things schools are going to be very mindful of is that there'll be some really reluctant parents out there. There'll be some parents who can't wait to get their kids out of the house, and then there will be some parents who are quite nervous, and for good, for fair enough reasons. And so there'll be a period where they have to rebuild trust, and parents need to get comfortable with sending their kids back to school. But in terms of what we're asking schools to do, we're not asking them to try and do online learning and teaching in the classroom at the same time. That would be really difficult. So I think what will happen if for example, kids are attending every second day, on the day that they are at school, I'd imagine that the school will be giving them some work to take home to do the following day when they're not at school. But I think the idea that teachers will be engaging with kids who are at home and kids in the classroom at the same time, we don't.
15th of November is the deadline for the first dose of the vaccine for teachers and people who have direct contact with children. Roughly, how many teachers are you expecting to miss that deadline, and how are you going to deal with teacher shortages?
Well, one of the reasons that we've gone with the 17th is just to give a 48-hour period to make sure that we've got all that lined up and to deal with any issues that arise. The ministry's been working very closely with schools, and the vast majority of schools are reporting that they think they'll be okay. There are a handful of schools that the ministry's working more closely with where they've indicated that they may have some difficulties, and so the ministry will work very closely with them there.
Okay, so you'll be aware that there are some schools saying that they don't have any teachers who want to get vaccinated. Are you just going to allow them to continue teaching online? Can they do that? And how long would you tolerate that for?
The ministry will work with schools to make some pragmatic decisions where necessary. One of the key messages that I've got for the sector is that there has been a lot of misinformation, and some of those schools where they're saying no teachers want to be vaccinated, it's because that community has been the target of a very active misinformation campaign. And we saw this with the port workers because they were amongst the first to be subject to the vaccine requirements. And when we worked with them to make sure that they're getting good, reliable information to combat that misinformation, a lot of that was overcome, and they ended up being vaccinated. So that's the work we're doing with schools at the moment.
Understand that, but if you come to that deadline date of the 15th of November and none of the teachers in this small school have been vaccinated, are you going to just let them continue to teach online, and how long for?
Ultimately, the Ministry of Education will work with schools to help make those sorts of decisions, and maybe there are other teachers that can be pressed into service to help fill that gap. And if we're able to do that, then we'll be able, then we'll certainly be looking to do that. If it's just not possible to staff a school, then the second option is to continue online learning until that's been sorted.
I noticed the Teachers' Council says it's going to continue to register and certify unvaccinated teachers. What's the point of that? They can't teach in a school.
Well, look, that's ultimately a matter for Teachers' Council. We don't determine the criteria for teacher registration. But
would you like them to take a stance, though, Minister, on this, given the mandate?
I'd certainly like the Teaching Council to, make a clear statement that their expectation is that teachers would be vaccinated in order to protect the children who are in their care. That's the reason we've introduced this requirement. It is to protect those young people who cannot be vaccinated.
We heard today that a third person has died in isolation at home. They have COVID. We don't yet know the cause of death. But, this sort of information scares people. And I know there's going to be investigations and a coroner's inquest and all the rest of it. But what are you immediately going to do differently?
Well, look, one of the realities around more COVID-19 cases is that there will be, unfortunately, more people who get very sick from COVID-19. The best protection they can have is to get fully vaccinated as quickly as they can. in terms of the self-isolation at home, the feedback we have from our COVID-positive cases is that the majority of them actually feel more comfortable isolating at home. It's where they want to be. They don't want to necessarily be in an MIQ. So we've got to make sure that we're wrapping the right support around them, and there will be bigger numbers of them. So the team at Health are working very hard to make sure that they're refining the way they do that. They're always looking for other things that they can do better. But of course, it will be challenging, and there will be some bumps there.
But 3 deaths, Minister, 3 deaths in a relatively short period of time can be quite alarming. And I'm wondering, I know you give people the choice about going into managed isolation, a facility versus home. There's a medical assessment, right, and a social assessment. What if your medical assessment is that you should actually be in a facility? Where does that leave you? Do you just leave the person to choose to stay at home regardless?
Look, I'm reluctant to comment on individual cases, but I'm aware of at least one of those cases where there was a medical recommendation for that person not to discharge, and they discharged themselves anyway. And so, that is challenging, and it's not fair on the health workforce to put any blame on them for that situation. So, these are difficult times, and there will be more people getting COVID-19. That's one of the reasons why we're working very hard to minimise the spread of COVID-19 and provide as much protection as we can. But ultimately, the best message here, and it is all the way along, is get fully vaccinated, because you're far less likely to find yourself in that position if you're fully vaccinated.
Is the government going to pass a vaccine mandate for the police force?
We're in discussion about that at the moment. I would say one of the things that we've been very clear on, we wouldn't use the power of the state as an employer to require things that we wouldn't expect other private sector employers to allow for, unless there's a very good public health and reason to do that. So with our border workforce, with our health and education workforces, there's very good public health reasons to do that. But we do consider other workforces, and we think, well, if it was a private sector employer, we have to behave the same way as they would behave.
Can you tell us when you're going to make a decision on that?
Look, it's an ongoing discussion between the government and the police.
And just while I've got you here, can I please book my departure time for driving out of Auckland over the Christmas summer break?
Look, as I said to you last week, Lisa, no decisions have been made on that yet.
And that's COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins. He's also the Education Minister. Ho mai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. So, primary school back next week, part-time, so that not all the kids are there at the same time. How do you feel about it? Will be you sending your own children back? Are you comfortable? Are you nervous? Let us know. Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. It is 17 minutes past 5. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. Thanks for listening. E haere ake nei, the pressure on police resourcing as officers take care of COVID checkpoints. The Prime Minister's visited Auckland for the first time since Delta arrived in the super city, but it was a fleeting visit. The decision not to visit battling retailers, cafes and bars hasn't gone down well with everyone, with some saying the Prime Minister probably didn't get to feel the pulse of the city. But Jacinda Ardern has promised she'll be back. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe.
Today.
That's right.
Thank you for having us today.
That's right.
And
very short notice.
Oh, well, look, we were, of course, it saves us just meeting in an office, gives us a chance to be able to have a yarn to someone who's been operating as well.
Jacinda Ardern back in the city she calls home for the first time since Delta drove it into lockdown. But public visits to reopened retailers and long-suffering closed-up cafes are not on the cards. The first stop, an engineering firm in industrial Avondale, one that's been able to stay open when so many had to close. The Prime Minister's visit here even came as a shock to JMP Engineering Managing Director Michael Thornton.
Very surprised. I mean, who wants to go to an engineering business? I mean, we're not affected in the same way that the hospitality or hairdressers or anything. But at the same time, just because we've got critical mass and we've created our own system, doesn't mean we're not feeling the effect of government decisions.
Today's public appearances were brief. Stop 2 a quick duck into a loud, proud, youth-led vaccination drive at Whale o Samoa. The dancing, the photo ops quickly replaced by questions. Why not visit Auckland's battling businesses on a day where some are finally allowed to let people back in? The Prime Minister saying she'll get to those small cafes and retailers eventually.
Of course, we'll make sure that we cover both. And so, of course, today was a chance to meet with not just one business, but actually business representatives who met me there. And, of course, we had a chance to have a longer form discussion. Before I met up with all of you, I took the chance to informally catch up with a few of those businesses who remain closed and who are opening today. But I will also be back.
But ACT leader and Epsom MP David Seymour says it's not good enough.
We thought her visit would be stage managed. We never predicted it would be a stealth visit, totally undetectable to 99.99% of Aucklanders. The Prime Minister needed to see the eyes that are angry, frustrated and fearful, even as people keep a brave face behind the mask.
And he's not alone. On the streets of Mangere, some say the PM would have got better insights in communities like theirs.
Just around Mangere, Otara, Papatawi, just around, just go around the communities just to see, where poor people are living, like the poverties and that.
They're struggling, just trying to get themselves back on their feet.
Businesses, families, people in the local suburbs of Manukau.
But the Prime Minister remains resolute, saying she does understand the plight of Aucklanders.
There is no way that you can replicate from afar the experience of having been through this outbreak for its entirety. And one visit doesn't replicate that either. But throughout, I've remained in contact with business representatives, with our health response, and of course with my family and friends to give me that insight into what it's been like to be working from home, to have the kids at home. All of that gives me an insight.
And the whirlwind tour wasn't a total breeze. The Prime Minister had to field some tough questions behind closed doors, challenged on MIQ settings by Employers and Manufacturers Association boss Brett O'Reilly and JMP Engineering Managing Director Michael Thornton.
We've set up overseas. It's jobs that have lost here in New Zealand, which will never come back, and we have to shift profit from New Zealand to America to keep the system going. If we had MIQ, if we didn't have MIQ or a simpler system, our guys would be travelling backwards and forwards.
The Prime Minister reiterating changes to MIQ are around the corner, but not committing to dates.
We are moving into a new phase of our response now, already trialling self-isolation, and in the new year expecting to use that much more broadly, which will take the pressure off our border system.
A return tour that was condensed to a few hours, but a parting promise from the PM that she'll keep her finger on the pulse of lockdown land.
And the video for that story from our two Nicks will be on our website. It's 22 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A New Plymouth school community is reeling over 3 staff members who died in a road crash in Hurewhenua. 4 people died when a truck and a van collided at Kuku on State Highway 1 just after 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
A shaken Devon Intermediate principal, Jenny Gallen, was still processing the news this afternoon.
3 of our staff members tragically passed away in a crash near Levin yesterday. So one was our caretaker, one was a teacher aide and one was a classroom teacher. Staff and students in the wider Devon whānau, of course, absolutely shocked.
Ms Gallen says the trio were respected members of the school staff.
So they're just extremely valued and important members of staff who are going to be really sadly missed by not only the school community but the whānau, the extended whānau and our school community.
A Ministry of Education trauma team has been at Devon Intermediate supporting staff and students, and the school remained open. Ms Gallen says it's a community school and a place where students and staff could feel safe and supported at what was a difficult time. The 3 staff members were reportedly at the protest at Parliament yesterday. The co-chair of the New Plymouth Principals Association, Bridget Luke, says the wider education community in Taranaki has been rocked by their deaths.
We're shocked and deeply saddened
our thoughts go out to the respective whānau in such a tragic time, and obviously the school that's dealing with this.
Ms Luke says the impact of losing 3 staff members in such a tragedy would be immense.
Well, it's huge really, isn't it? Because it's the sudden loss of 3 staff members within a school setting, within the terms of the children and the staff and colleagues and the wider. It's very hard in the initial instance because it's just a shock setting in, but it'll be huge.
The 4th fatality is yet to be formally identified, but is believed to be a male, also from New Plymouth. The driver of the truck is in a stable condition in Palmerston North Hospital. Meanwhile, Horowhenua Mayor Bernie Ardern told Morning Report the stretch of highway is dangerous.
It's an open piece of road with some windy bits, some bridges. The road between Otaki and Levin is quite fast for a lot of traffic. There are passing lanes that are near that corner, and I think that causes people probably to speed up more than they should.
Mr Ardern says Wakakotahi has plans for safety improvements, including wider centre lines, side barriers and a review of speed limits. But that work is only scheduled to begin mid-2022.
Unfortunately, we now have more statistics to add to that piece of road, which has proved to be, as I said, notorious and dangerous for many years now.
Mr Ardern said the ultimate solution would be an extension of the expressway, but that is some years off. AA figures show that 13 people have died and 27 have been seriously injured on the stretch of highway between Levin and Otaki within the last 4 years.
Hundreds of frontline officers are policing COVID borders and dealing with COVID protests. So what does that mean for their day jobs? Responding to burglaries, domestic violence and other crimes. Next week, the government says it'll make an announcement about when the Auckland boundary will reopen. Already, the Police Association says it'll be impossible to manage over summer. And joining me now is the Police Association boss, Chris Cahill. Chris, how many officers are assigned to these, COVID border duties and MIQ?
Well, there's about 300 at the border duties and about another 300 in MIQ. So 600 plus a number of staff that have to organise it and administer it. So, you're talking upwards to even heading towards the 700 on occasions.
So where do they come from? And by that I mean geographically, and also what duties have they left behind to do these new things?
Well, certainly the majority are from the 3 Auckland districts, so from Tamaki and Kaurau. And that's because, obviously, that's where most of the MIQ facilities are, and that's where the staff in Auckland have to come from to man those checkpoints or staff those checkpoints. We do have about 75 overall that are assisting either at the southern checkpoint or some based in Whangarei doing the northern checkpoint, but pretty limited numbers, so it's a real strain on Auckland.
So when you say 75, do you mean those officers have come from different districts?
That's right. They've been sent from around the country to try and assist. But we can only have so many because clearly the borders are within Auckland mainly, and so the staff have to isolate within Auckland because they're also subject to the Auckland lockdowns.
So 650 plus police is not a small number. So what does that mean for other policing, like, burglaries, preventative policing, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it leaves everything very stretched. It's simply police can't do everything and certainly can't do it in the same time frame. So a lot of the prevention duties have had to take a back seat. Some of the investigations of minor crimes certainly can't be attended to, and that's just the nature of you can only do so much when you're short-staffed. And obviously staff are stretched just simply dealing with what's comes day-to-day around COVID. Obviously the latest protests just add to that pressure.
So in all honesty, in your view, it's not possible to maintain the same policing standards with all of these officers working on what we would loosely call COVID duties?
No, it certainly isn't. Something has to give. And look, the idea of checkpoints was always something that could only last for a limited period of time. We're a bit surprised to hear the idea that they'll be going through the Christmas, New Year period, but if that's the case, we certainly don't see logistically how you could manage to checking for vaccination or testing certificates. It just doesn't seem feasible. The queues of tens of thousands of cars would just be too great.
You're already 3 months into it though, so how much longer is it sustainable having your people diverted to this kind of work?
Well, not that much longer, to be perfectly honest. Police resources are stretched, and it's really a matter of what priorities have to give, and police are assessing that every day. But as the public sort of put more demands on police, as I say, the protest this week, that then stretches where else police can. So I know the government are aware of this and they're weighing up all these factors, but it all comes down to that vaccination rate, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, but when you look at it, do you see COVID checkpoint duties as a top priority when you look at all the other things those police officers could be doing?
Well, that's probably a matter for the politics and the Commissioner to work out between them. I mean, certainly at the start it was suppressing the spread of COVID out of Auckland when those initial breaks happened, certainly one. But now I think we're moving to the period where we have to understand what living with COVID is going to be like. And that's where we've talked about that 90% vaccination. So what's policing going to look when we get to that 90% vaccination rate? Because I don't think it can look as it does now with border checkpoints.
Hey, I was just talking to Chris Hipkins, COVID Response Minister, and he says mandatory vaccination for police officers is still under consideration, no decision yet. What do you think? Should it be compulsory for police officers to be vaccinated against COVID?
Well, there's a lot of different opinions on that, and even our members have different opinions. Look, our view is it needs to be a legal question. There's lots of different views medically and morally. So what we say is if the government has the advice that says it should be mandated and they pass the law that makes that legal, we will support a mandate. But they need to decide and pass the law rather than just leave it up to police to have to make that call.
Would it be easier if they just said, yep, you have to have it?
It would certainly be easier logistically. We know police are already captured by mandates for health, to some degree corrections, and certainly education. So it starts to get complicated when you have some government departments mandated and others not. As I say, it has to be a legal mandate from the government, we believe.
Good to talk to you, Chris. That's Chris Cahill from the Police Association. Kia ora e te iwi e haere ake nei e a checkpoint. School's back. Well, it will be, but not as we know it. Aucklanders shop their feelings, hopefully not up close, but definitely in person. And the long night ahead for Black Cap fans. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do you reckon there should be a vaccine mandate for police? And at the moment, we've got about 650 of them working on the COVID checkpoints. Is that the best use of their time? You can text, and an MIQ, you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And, well, it's time for the headlines now. So, ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Whawhate lava. The Education Minister says he recognises that some parents will be nervous and a bit reluctant to send their children back to school next week. The government announced all primary school students in Auckland and Waikato can return to the classroom next Wednesday as long as they stick to public health guidance. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, who was also in charge of COVID response, told Checkpoint some parents are likely to have some issues of trust and concerns about safety. He says the ministry will expect schools to be flexible and still offer online learning if they face shortages because some of their teachers don't get vaccinated by next Monday. The Director General of Health says the ministry will conduct thorough investigations into each of the 3 deaths of people with COVID-19 who have been isolating at home. A third person was confirmed today to have died at home in Auckland while self-isolating with the virus. The cause of death will be determined by the coroner. There were 148 new community cases reported today, all in Auckland, except 2 in Northland and 14 in Waikato King Country. Opposition MPs have supported the decision to allow AstraZeneca vaccinations to a small group of people, although the ACT Party says it should be made available to anyone reluctant to get the Pfizer jabs. The Health Ministry says the vaccine will be on offer from late November for the few hundred people who cannot have Pfizer for medical reasons. Both Nationals Chris Bishop and ACT's David Seymour say the Pfizer vaccine is safe and effective, but it's good to have choices for people who are reluctant. And the Taranaki Medical Officer of Health says people in the region need to monitor their health for any COVID-19 symptoms following more positive wastewater results at the weekend. Dr. Jonathan Jarman says while it's most likely the result came from a visitor, people need to stay vigilant. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Nā mihi marama, kia ora anō. You're listening to Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nāianei, ko Nicholas Poynton, here to talk business. Let's start with Weta Digital, Nicholas. So it's flicked off its tech unit and got a bit of a big payday out of it?
Yeah, this is a big deal announced on the New York Stock Exchange this morning. That's from the US software development company called Unity. They essentially build the tools that game developers and animators use to actually create content. And they're spending $1.6 billion US, that's about 2.2 or $2.3 billion in local currency, to buy Weta Digital's technology unit. And for that money, that includes access to the unique animation tools that Weta's software engineers have built over the years. These have helped bring characters to life in movies like Avatar, The Lord of the Rings, and Planet of the Apes. Unity will also acquire 275 of Weta's engineers, as well as access to its special data platform, which, if you can imagine, is like a virtual factory for visual effects artists, in which each part of the design process can be passed down the supply chain within the same program. Sounds like complicated stuff. It is, but incredibly valuable given how much the price that's been paid here. I just actually had the pleasure of speaking to Weta Digital's chief executive about this, and I asked him, if these tools are so valuable, why have you not tried to distribute them yourself? Why go through an intermediary? He says that currently these tools are like, to paraphrase his analogy, it's like an old second-hand car that you've grown accustomed to. You understand all its quirks, you know what sounds you need to pay attention to, which ones to ignore, but if you're trying to sell that product to other people, people want it to be perfect. Hence, here comes Unity. Apparently, Weta Digital say that they expect Unity to spend more than they did on the purchase price for the software just to bring it up to scratch so it can distribute. It will be made available to digital artists, animators, game developers around the world through a subscription platform, and Weta will benefit from its use as the transaction, the price that's been paid to Weta Digital. It's a combination of cash and shares in Unity.
And Nicholas, motor vehicle financing, the sector may be falling a bit short when it comes to helping out customers?
Yeah, this is a new report into the sector by the Commerce Commission, and to be fair, it says for the most part, respondents it's spoken to are very happy with their experience when securing motor finance, but it is a little bit concerned that the sector may be falling short of its legal obligations to help customers when making informed decisions. They said that some didn't understand the products they purchased or were sold add-ons that they don't recall buying, or discovered that actually really had no use for. And the Commerce Commission is going to undertake some further work because they really want to make sure that lenders understand their obligations to help their customers make informed choices when they're talking about loans or when they're taking loans to buy cars and when they're buying insurance products that are associated with those loans. And look, they say that they plan to engage with sort of lenders and insurers who've participated in this review just to really bring them up to speed of what's actually expected with them when they're dealing with customers in this space.
And what numbers do you bring us from the markets, Nicholas?
Well, the NZX is down 68 points, or about 0.5% to 13,022. The New Zealand dollar is trading at 71.1 US cents and 96.5 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite, that's Nicholas Poynton with Business News. The first taste of normality for Aucklanders today, with retailers swinging open the doors for the first time in 3 months. At alert level 3.2, shops can reopen, but with masks and social distancing in place. Shoppers were out in full force at Sylvia Park, eager to do some physical browsing, while shop owners were juggling trading under the new restrictions. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to check out the first day back.
It's lunchtime here at Sylvia Park and things are starting to pick up on the first day back. Some shoppers were so keen to be the first in store, they were lining up yesterday for those stores that opened at midnight on the dot. But it's shopping level 3.2 style, so that means a 2 metre distance and everyone needs a mask. And you won't be able to sit down to eat, it's still takeaways for hospitality.
Car parks full of shoppers thrilled to get some retail therapy at long last, with full trolleys and bags to prove it.
It's been such a long time, but good to be back to
a little bit of normal.
Oh, it's exciting having interactions with people that aren't in your bubble. And it's great. I think everyone's excited. It's a little more quieter than we expected.
I love shopping. So we were the first in the morning. We came in at 9 a.m. in the morning. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. And we're just leaving now after spending a lot of money. We have kept a lot of bags in my car already, and we're done with shopping now.
I've just taken a break from work, so I'm heading down to the warehouse to see if I can get some work shorts because it's getting a bit hot for longs now.
It feels the exact same as it did last year when we went back into level 2, except there's just minor differences, and it just with Delta in there instead of normal COVID, it just feels a bit different and more scarier.
For stores, the most important thing is people are browsing the racks again. It's a welcome relief for manager of Mayor's Shoes, Lenise Dunshee.
I left the store yesterday afternoon and I looked back as I closed the doors and I thought, it's beautiful, we are ready.
They've been itching to get back to serving customers face to face.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's even just passing people in the thoroughfares. They can't see you smiling, but hopefully they can see it in your eyes.
And they've had a while to set their rules for shoe shopping etiquette.
So we're encouraging people not to touch the shoes on the shelf, to ask us for a size. We're giving them a disposable try-on stocking, and rather than helping them with the shoe, we'll put the shoe on the counter or on the other couch and they can then take it and put it on themselves.
For now, customers are understanding, but she's concerned standards could slip.
People are really happy to be cautious. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see in a week or 2 weeks how that's going. I think we get very lax very quickly.
At Look Smart Clothing Alterations and Dry Cleaning, it's been a busy morning tackling requests for alterations to online lockdown purchases that don't quite fit. Manager Nesia says existing customers missed the boat to get some of their clothes back before lockdown hit.
They're all very eager to get their garments and we're eager to give them all back. So, because we got locked down on the Tuesday and lots of people don't come in until Thursday to pick up their garments.
She explains tailoring in 3.2 is complicated.
If it's just shortening pants, we've got 3 fitting rooms, so we can do both ends and keep the middle one empty. So that's giving them 2 metres apart. If it's something facial, we get them to face one way and we go around the back of them and we work from the back. If it's something in the front, we get them to turn their head one to side. We're all masked and we do the QI.
And when it comes to skincare, masks and distancing make it tricky at Oregani. Manager Roberto says they're having to get creative to manage customers wanting to try products.
We got like a sticks, for example, from here. And like basically we just pour a little tiny bit on the hand so they can feel it. And after that, like also for body products, we wash like in the bowl and we grab like this, a paper towel, we don't touch, they grab it, they dry their hands and they can chuck in here. Once we finish, put everything in the rubbish and we sanitize here.
He's hopeful they'll get the boost they need before Christmas.
I really believe that like in a week time, like things will get better, people get more confident to approach like even stores, so it's definitely like first day, great vibes.
For now, this is shopping in Auckland, until alert levels are reviewed on the 29th of November in the hopes of moving to the new traffic light system.
If you're listening to that on radio, check out Marika and Louisa's story online. We'll put the video on our web page. So how did it go for retailers today? Well, Sylvia Park spokesperson Linda Traynor joins us now. Hi, Linda. How busy was it in terms of foot traffic?
Oh, hi there. Hey, we have had such a great day today. It has been so good to see our retailers and our customers back at Sylvia Park and Limball. It's been a really steady day. It started off with a bit of a flurry. We had some queues outside some stores, and of course JD Sports opened at 12:01 this morning with all those eagerly waiting people outside that we heard about yesterday.
So were you counting people as they come and go?
Yes, we do. So our centres have counters on each of the doors, so we know how many people have come in and how many people have gone out at any one time.
How did it compare then to, well, can we call it a normal day shopping, before all of this happened with lockdown? How did it compare to one of those days?
Yeah, the day's not over, so it's hard for me to actually give that information because the day's not finished yet, because Sylvia Park keeps trading until 7. But I was there for most of the day, and it was definitely steady, and it was actually building as the day went on. And there was a really great vibe. Honestly, people were just seemed, really happy to be back. And I observed two types of shoppers. We had our people who were absolutely focused on what they needed to do, and you could see them race around and get their parcels, and you could see them a few minutes later with more parcels in their hands. And then there were other shoppers that were there for literally for hours and just taking their time, checking out the new season stock, looking at the latest fashions, and just having a nice day.
How easy has it been for stores to manage flows, manage social distancing, check up on masks, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, look, our retailers and our tenants are seasoned professionals, and they're absolutely onto it. The larger ones, often they had security guards just checking that people were scanning in, but every store had scanning in place, the expectation that you wear masks, of course, they were checking in on people. But, overall, people were really respectful of each other, they're really respectful of their space, and it was just such a good vibe today.
Yeah, and retailers, how much have they needed this boost?
Oh, my goodness. After almost 3 months, this is the day we've been waiting for, and it really didn't disappoint. So I'm so thrilled for our retailers and our customers.
Linda, are you assuming the brace position for the weekend?
Well, look, I think today, like I said, it was a really steady day. But we have to remember people are still working from home. People are still homeschooling children. That still needs to happen. And this weekend, I'm sure there'll be more people who will venture out to find their favourite store again. But just to give people comfort, as you mentioned before, we do count people as they come in and out of our doors, and we know exactly what our capacity levels are for Sylvia Park or any of our centres, and we know in real time how many people are in those centres. So, if for any reason we felt we were getting to capacity, I personally get an alert, and I can advise the team then, hey, we need to start thinking about limiting numbers. We didn't need to do that today. We weren't, close to those limits. So the good thing is that, we're not going to put anyone in a situation that won't be anything but comfortable for them.
So, Linda, given you're potentially looking at more people wanting to get out over the weekend, are you going to be doing any longer hours or anything like that?
Well, we do longer hours. So on Thursdays and Fridays, we have late nights till 9, and then obviously we close at 7 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday. So they are later than most shopping centres.
Really appreciate you joining us this evening. That's Linda Traynor, who's the Sylvia Park spokesperson. Really busy day out there. As she said, they count everyone coming in and going out. It is 14 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A lot of you getting in touch about schools. This listener says schools can't come soon enough. My twins have suffered insomnia and anxiety away from school and normal routine. Feel even worse for children in vulnerable situations, not able to escape for 6 hours. Youth depression and anxiety for Auckland kids has been real and a real thing thanks to missing school. Another person says, happy to send my children back to school. Teachers have the skills to keep our kids as safe as possible. Let's dial back the fear for our kids. This is our new normal. And Jane from Auckland's got in touch to say, I have 3 kids in years 11, 10 and 7. On the 16th, it's my daughter's last day at school to have time for study leave. So off the boys go, well, at least one of them will certainly go on the 17th. Regardless, my husband is still working from home at the end of the hallway. Will I ever get the house empty to myself, says Jane. No, methinks, she says. Thank you for your feedback. Keep it coming. Text us on 2101. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, well, we talked to a school principal about heading back to school, like actually in the class. A man with COVID-19 has suddenly died while isolating at home, the third such incident in the past week. The man, who was in his 60s, had been staying at a home in Glen Eden in West Auckland. The Health Ministry says the coroner will now investigate the death and whether it was due to the virus. It comes after 2 other deaths last week, a 40-year-old man isolating in Manukau and a man in his 50s in Mount Eden. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says self-isolating at home is generally working well.
We're looking back at each of these deaths, obviously, to see what was the level of interaction, exactly what happened in those cases. Was there any problem with the clinical assessment and also the clinical handover? There's nothing to suggest so yet, and obviously the third one, which just came in overnight, we don't have detail on, but we look very carefully at any opportunity to improve both the initial assessment and allocation of someone and also how the system is working. We are, of course, using pulse oximeters where people we think may need to be monitored because some people can deteriorate quite quickly even if they have a history of being well and are well at the time.
Dr Bloomfield was unable to say whether the man had been given the machine to monitor his oxygen levels and heart rate or when he was last contacted by health officials. The government today also announced it would soon make the AstraZeneca vaccine available for a small number of people. Until now, New Zealanders have been able to receive only the Pfizer jab, but an alternative will be on offer from late November for the few hundred people who cannot have Pfizer for medical reasons. It will also be an option for workers who are required to have a jab to keep their job. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, says that may help keep some people from quitting, but he stresses that Pfizer is a safe and effective vaccine.
We want to make sure that if people are saying that they would prefer to have AstraZeneca, that they're making an informed decision there, not based on misinformation about an mRNA vaccine, which is a very safe vaccine. So we will put in place a process that will make sure that if people are doing that, they're doing it in a way that is considered and informed, rather than one that's based on misinformation.
Both the National Party and ACT have thrown their support behind the decision. A place in yet another tournament finally awaits the Black Caps at cricket's T20 World Cup. New Zealand will feature in the first semi-final against England in Abu Dhabi early tomorrow morning, really early tomorrow morning. And while England enter the match as favourites, a confident Black Caps outfit are no strangers to the sudden death stages of ICC events. Clay Wilson reports.
Calm, composed and quietly confident. A decade ago, they wouldn't have been the first adjectives used to describe the Black Caps ahead of a World Cup semi-final. But after a raft of recent success, it's exactly where the New Zealand side sits as they bid to book a spot in the T20 title decider. Captain Kane Williamson says there's a different atmosphere when it's crunch time in a tournament.
You turn up in finals cricket, and especially in T20 cricket, where on the day there's match winners throughout and anything can happen, but it's exciting and players are all really looking forward to the occasion.
An occasion they won't be daunted by, especially as World Test champions, finalists at the past two 50-over World Cups and semi-finalists at this tournament in 2016. Coach Gary Stead says this group of Black Caps know a thing or two about big matches.
I'm not sure when you line each player up man for man that a lot of people give us the credit that perhaps some of these guys deserve. It's a pretty experienced group of guys now who know each other's game very, very well. And I think as a collective group that we do fight hard, and the results at the end of the day will look after themselves if we do those little things well.
New Zealand also enter the match on the back of 4 straight wins. England captain Owen Morgan says they're well aware of the qualities the Black Caps possess.
They've been very strong. To turn over India in the fashion that they did takes quite a lot of cohesion within the side as well. They're a team that plays really strong together as a group, as opposed to being heavily reliant on one or two individuals.
Still, individuals can have a big bearing on matches in the game's shortest format. And it's for that reason Morgan admits the loss of destructive opening batter Jason Roy to injury is a big blow.
Yeah, he's unbelievably important. He's a guy who epitomises everything that we are about in the changing room and the way that we play. You see how commanding he is at the top of the order, not only in T20 cricket but 50-over cricket as well. But yeah, he's as close as we get to surmising how the changing room should play.
But even without Roy, England's batting lineup is packed with power. Led by the tournament's leading run scorer Jos Buttler, they also notched 4 straight victories before completing the group stage with a narrow loss to South Africa. Kane Williamson says the Black Caps know exactly what they're up against.
That's been a big, movement of their white ball side, sort of power-packed and bat quite deep as well. And so there are, a number of threats, and we also have a number of match winners as well. And, at the end of the day, it's trying to commit to, what you do as a team.
Successfully doing that would not only mean New Zealand advance to another World Cup final. Revenge for the outcome of that 2019 One-Day World Cup decider is also up for grabs. The Black Caps insist that's not their focus. But that doesn't mean they're not motivated, and coach Gary Stead is welcoming England's attacking approach.
That also brings opportunity with it as well. So if they don't get it quite right, then that brings perhaps our bowlers into the game. So we obviously know that England have a lot of power. They've been the dominant white ball side in world cricket for the last 2 or 3 years, but it's a one-off game. We'll go in with a lot of confidence and hopefully fire some shots at England that they may not expect.
Tomorrow morning's semi-final starts at 3 a.m, with the winner going through to play either Pakistan or Australia in the final.
The delight of reopening restaurants and cafes in Melbourne has come to a screeching halt. Melbourne's coming back to life after its 6th lockdown, but now there's a critical shortage of hospitality staff. Restaurant owners say skilled foreign workers have long gone because of the pandemic, and they can't get local staff to fill the shifts. The ABC's Emily Burke reports.
The excitement of lockdown ending and the resumption of dining in has been tempered with a harsh reality that there are not enough staff to cook the food and serve. The Victorian government announced a $44 million package to entice people back into Melbourne's eateries, and from next week, diners will be able to claim 30% back on their bill if they spend between $50 and $500 at cafes, restaurants and bars. But some of the more established venues are closing their doors midweek.
You know, we want to open, everyone wants us open, the government's want us open, and we're unable to open to the full extent.
Sean Kearse owns the 2 Ladro outlets in inner Melbourne and spoke to ABC Melbourne.
Pre-pandemic, positions were often easier to fill. What I think has happened is that a lot of the visa holders who are the backbone of our industry have either gone home or they've moved interstate or they've found other industries to work in.
Jason M. Jones owns the Entrecote restaurant.
We've had to make the call only yesterday after only opening last week after being open and closed for 20 months or so. But we can't even open for breakfast any longer because simply we just can't get staff to fill the shifts.
It is such a crisis. It's worse than it's ever been. It is all anybody is talking about. It's absolutely dire.
Danny Vallant is a food journalist.
People were already understaffed 2 years ago, but the various impacts of the pandemic have made it, and it's like absolutely distressing for many restaurateurs. Probably the biggest factor is all the internationals that have left Australia because they weren't offered JobKeeper, they weren't looked after during the first year of the pandemic. There's also hasn't been that influx of visitors, international students and backpackers that Australia gets every year, plus of course the skilled workers that are brought out on sponsored visas. They haven't been coming in either. So there's that. There's also the fact that a lot of people during lockdown have realised that perhaps hospitality isn't an industry that was working for them.
As far as the industry goes, is there an issue around wages for those skilled staff? I mean, there have been very high-profile claims of wage theft, and barely a day goes by without the Fair Work Ombudsman announcing an audit or a breach or legal action and fines against hospitality operators. So is that playing a part in this?
I think definitely hospitality's got a reputation problem among Australians as an industry where underpayment and bad conditions are rife, and that certainly has been and continues to be an issue. I would say that the high-profile airing of those compliance issues has helped the situation somewhat. At the moment, I think what you are seeing is it's an employees market, so there is no reason for anybody to take any position that isn't offering them award wages and conditions.
How do we unlock this?
Well, I mean, I think unlocking is not a bad word to use because we need to unlock the borders and bring in fully vaccinated workers who are ready and willing to fill these positions. And it is about a more long-term series of measures to be taken around making hospitality seem like a more attractive and viable career for Australians who are, leaving school or on the verge of leaving school, and looking at it more longer term in terms of training and looking at a whole culture around respecting hospitality as a place to work.
And let's get to some of your feedback now before the news at 6. Some of you getting in touch on vaccine status. Jilly says, we need to know if these people who died in self-isolation were vaccinated. Also, the people who are in hospital and quite ill. Just the bare facts takes the politics out of it. Someone else in the same vein saying, Lisa, whenever there's a death at home in isolation, I never seem to hear whether they were fully vaccinated. I suspect most aren't, and surely that could help to spread the message. Okay. Absolutely. We have asked whether the people who have died while self-isolating are vaccinated, what their status is. That information is not yet available. We'll keep asking for you. On the subject of hospitalisations, in recent days, Ministry of Health has started to break down the vaccination status. Not vaccinated, not eligible, 2 jabs or 1. And Matthew, our lovely team member, he can put a link on our web page so that you'll be able to look at that breakdown for yourselves. So, coming soon. On the vaccine mandate for teachers, this listener says, I find it very interesting that there are so many teachers, especially in rural schools, that don't want to follow the rules, and they spend lots of time telling pupils what to do. Also, should we be worried about narrow-minded teachers teaching our children? Another person says, to tell you the truth, we've been bitterly disappointed in the stance of teachers and principals. It's been bloody difficult, and even though we were allowed to send our kids to school as essential workers, they were made to feel like lepers, and there was no before or after school care. I don't know of any essential worker that works between 9:30 and 2:30 p.m. Another listener says all mandates need to be dropped immediately, and vaccine passports should also be dropped. And on that subject of vaccine mandates, somebody says police should be mandated. They're on the internal borders, checking those going through, meaning they could be the carriers of COVID. How often are they tested before going on to the borders? A lot of you agree with that. Police should be mandated. Yes, police should be vaccinated. All of them frontline serving the public.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. The National Party wants most Auckland schools to completely reopen full-time as soon as possible. The government has announced schools can welcome pupils back from next Wednesday, with the option of doing so on a part-time basis in consultation with their communities. National's education spokesperson Paul Goldsmith says he's pleased children can finally return to the classroom, but says they need to be there more than part-time.
Parents might be very frustrated to find that the kids are going back 1 day a week or for short periods of time, and I think we should have a clear expectation that they're back, if not all the time, most of the time.
However, the Green Party isn't convinced a return to the classroom is the best thing at the moment. Co-leader Marama Davidson says schools shouldn't reopen until students are protected.
Not every school does have adequate ventilation right now. Not every Auckland school does have the proper safe environment, and not every community has got high vaccination rates that belong to those schools. So I am not convinced that it is the safest thing to do right now.
Taranaki's Medical Officer of Health has sounded the alert about the possible spread of COVID-19 in the region. Jonathan Jarman says new wastewater results suggest an infected person was in the Stratford area from the start of this month. He says the results bring a mixture of bad and good news.
The bad news is now we've had 3 wastewater tests which have detected viral fragments. The good news is that the most recent one was negative.
Jonathan Jarman says the positive test result can most likely be traced to someone visiting the region for its garden festival. Meanwhile, another wastewater test in Napier has come back negative for COVID-19, but Hawke's Bay Medical Officer of Health Nick Jones says it's too early to be complacent. Another wastewater sample was collected in Napier today, and results are expected later this week. The DHB is now offering another testing option after its slow response to a positive wastewater result last week was criticised by the city's mayor. Dr Jones says that from tomorrow, people will be able to visit a Napier drive-through centre without an appointment. The police say they've almost finished their investigation into the car crash that killed 5 Timaru teenagers 3 months ago. 5 boys aged 15 or 16 died when their car hit a power pole with such force that it split the car in 2. The sole survivor, the 19-year-old driver, was injured. No charges have yet been laid, but the police say they're awaiting specialist reports before completing their investigation. An Australian diplomat says a deal with the US and the UK to build nuclear-powered submarines is about maintaining the 3 nations' influence in the region. The ABC's Jade McMillan has more.
Australia will acquire nuclear-powered submarines as part of the AUKUS arrangement. China has criticised the deal as a threat to regional stability. But Australia's ambassador in Washington, Arthur Sinodinos, has told an American think tank that Australia needs to take a more proactive role in the Indo-Pacific.
We want to be able to, in this deteriorating strategic circumstances, be able to project our power further up.
He says the government intends to build the submarines in South Australia using an existing design.
A Queenstown tourism operator has been fined $160,000 and ordered to pay $35,000 to a former employee who was seriously injured on one of its boats last year. Southern Discoveries had admitted one charge of exposing an individual to a risk of death or serious injury. The employee fell more than 2 metres through an open hatch on a passenger vessel, the Spirit of Queenstown, and landed on their back. The hatch had been left open by a colleague the night before. It's 6:04. England are giving the Black Caps few clues ahead of their T20 World Cup semi-final in Abu Dhabi early tomorrow. England, the 2010 champions, suffered a blow in their final pool match when opener Jason Roy tore his calf and have been forced to rejig their top order for the semi. Skipper Owen Morgan says they've decided who will partner Joss Buttler, but they're not revealing who. Black Caps captain Kane Williamson says it's disappointing for Roy to miss the match, but one of England's strength is their depth.
And having spent some time at the Birmingham Phoenix and been sort of a little bit involved in that 100 ball comp, you can tell that there's a huge amount of talent throughout. So they're still very much a very strong side.
The game starts at 3 a.m. Halfback Aaron Smith won't be considered for this weekend's rugby test between New Zealand and Ireland in Dublin. Smith didn't venture overseas for any of the All Blacks tests this year as he awaited the birth of a child, but flew out last night as cover for Brad Weber, who suffered a head knock against Italy last weekend. TJ Perenara is expected to start with either Finlay Christie or Weber on the bench. And New Zealand sailor Tom Saunders is on the verge of World Championship success. He sits at the head of the fleet going into the final day of the Laser World Champs in Barcelona. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, pictures and words. First, historian Dame Anne Salmon on her great-grandfather James MacDonald and his work photographing tikanga Māori. Wildlife photographer Michael Sabo, well, that's one of the things he does when he's not writing, most recently about the first 50 years of Greenpeace. And then there's this week's Hump Prize, Prince, a portrait of the artist in Memories and Memorabilia on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Ko te matapai huarere mo Aotearoa. Here's the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday for Northland. Generally fine, isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and the Tararua District. Fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. Isolated showers inland during the afternoons and evenings. Thunderstorms possible east of Tauranga. Downpours possible for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay today. Auckland to Wellington, also Wairarapa, excluding the Tararua District. Fine apart from areas of cloud this evening. Isolated showers developing tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Buller to Fiordland. Mostly cloudy, patchy light rain or drizzle this evening. Showers developing tomorrow. For Canterbury, mostly cloudy with fine breaks. Isolated showers developing inland during the afternoons. Southland and Otago often cloudy with isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with occasional drizzle. It's 6:07.
Nā mihi marama, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. After 3 months at home, Auckland students will be allowed back in school gates next week. But for primary and intermediates, it'll only be part-time to minimise the COVID risk. The government says with safety measures in place, the benefits of children returning outweighs the risks of COVID-19. Parents and students are rejoicing. Jordan Bond reports.
It's been 3 long months since intermediate student Julia has been at school.
It feels like a million years ago.
She says real school is a lot better than the one over the computer.
I find it easier to learn things in physical school because you're not sitting at a desk all day, on your butt all day, and it's boring. Meanwhile, at actual school, you are experiencing things with other kids, with other people.
Her mum Rachel says her children learning from home hasn't been easy for anyone in the family.
Hit or miss. I think it's a struggle when you have two working parents and kids to try to find a way to balance helping your kids with their school and also doing your work.
So she's happy with the outcome.
I think they miss their friends, they miss their teachers, they miss being in the classroom. So anything we can do to get them back there safely is fine with us.
The long grind taking its toll was part of the decision. COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins says the call was made in part for people's well-being, rather than solely educational purposes.
The ongoing restrictions have been incredibly hard on children and young people, and of course their families as well. And returning to school, interacting with their friends and their teachers, and getting back to face-to-face learning will have a positive impact on their well-being as well as their learning as they head towards the Christmas break.
Students returning is safe, he says, as long as there are safeguards.
Public health advice supports a return to on-site learning. Some further measures do need to be put in place, and they will be. That includes mask wearing for year 4 and up, ventilating classrooms, which will become a lot easier over the summer break, limiting the number of students on site, and making sure that groups of children distance from each other.
Years 9 and 10, most of whom are over 12 and can be vaccinated, can go back to school full-time to join up with their senior students who are already back. But years 1 to 8 will only return part-time, with a limit on the number of students allowed on site at once. A return to school was what the National Party wanted, with spokesperson Paul Goldsmith making their school's announcement a few hours before the government's.
There are always risks in returning to school. We think that the risks of not returning are greater because of the disengagement and the fact if they don't go back before the end of the year, it will be 5 months that kids have had out of the classroom. When you're an 8-year-old, that's a lifetime.
It'll be up to primary schools on how they limit student numbers, but the Minister suggested different groups could attend on alternating days. Auckland Primary Principals Association President Stephen Lethbridge says it's up to the individual school to decide, and that's a good thing.
In the Auckland region, COVID is in the community, so it's all about managing the risks. There's a whole lot of ideas and thoughts out there, and I think that what the Minister has given us is the flexibility to be able to cater for our own communities.
By this coming Monday, before these students are back, all teachers will have to have had 1 dose of the vaccine. Chris Hipkins says this reduces the risk even more.
So what's clear is that the risks of reopening schools are outweighed by the benefits of kids re-engaging in their learning in a face-to-face context.
So the countdown's on, only 4 more days of online school for Auckland children.
Jean Batten School is a primary school with about 400 students in Mangere East. Ko taku manuhiri anai nei, ko Nadi Leonard. Nadi's the principal there. Tēnā koe, Nadi.
Tēnā koe, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Ka pai. So are you excited, nervous, bit of both for next week?
Definitely a bit of both. Excited in the anticipation of seeing some very excited little ones returning to school, but a little bit of trepidation in regards to, just ensuring that we are a safe environment for everyone in our community.
What do you reckon it's going to look like for your students? Are you going to have some on some days? And what are you going to do about ventilation? Is it just throwing open the windows? Will there be outside classes? What's it going to look like?
Well, yes, we did a little bit of homework pre the announcement, had a few scenarios on the table. After the Minister releasing his announcement today and allowing us to have the flexibility, at my school, we envisage that there will definitely be some outside classrooms taking place. We've got good shaded areas. The weather's gorgeous, so why wouldn't you want to be outside? We will be opening the gates to everyone who has indicated that they will be returning. That is, at this stage, approximately a quarter of our roll. So, and then from there, we'll just, there are still some people that are sitting on the fence. Mangere is considered a hot spot, so that's probably making people very cautious, and so we're cautious as well at school.
So if you think you're going to get around 25% back, right, face-to-face lessons, what happens with the other kids? Are you still going to have online learning? Will they learn from hard copies? How are you going to keep them ticking over in terms of lessons?
Well, we have, I've briefly talked about that with the senior leadership team, with some of our staff, and we're going to have a full meeting tomorrow morning. But we do envisage for the rest of 2021, we will continue meeting the learning needs, whether that be online, whether it be providing the hard packs or even the face-to-face at school. But that's just for 2021. And it's mainly because quietly, I'm okay with not everybody returning, because that means we've got more space at school for those who are. So there's a little bit of a win-win here where if parents are okay at keeping their children at home, then we'll continue with the online, because that in turn is helping us with the physical face-to-face at school.
So, Nadi, with the 25%, does that mean that those kids who do want to come back will be able to come back every day because you've got sort of a reasonably small group of returnees?
As long as we don't see an escalation in numbers from, we're talking about 4 weeks here, and we're really talking about just reconnecting with our community. It's not about standing at the front, you will read this ABC and all that. It really is about reconnecting with our community and our students. So we will monitor very closely attendance levels. We will be very cautious about how we conduct ourselves in the school, and should we start, that is what I'll be sharing with parents, that should we start to feel unsafe ourselves or we're anticipating, then we will need to have that hooey with everybody and say we've got to change something here.
So in terms of the month that you're going to get with the kids who are coming back, is it then one of your priorities to check where they're at, to see what you're dealing with, how much they've taken in over this period of time and where to next? Rather than sort of hardcore, as you say, reading from a book, you will do this, that and the other.
Absolutely. You've hit it on the head. It's really just about reconnecting. We wonder how these young ones are. When you have adults, when you have teenagers, they're probably a little bit more articulate about, this whole situation that we've been in for the last 3 months. But, also our little 6 and our 5-year-olds, they want a voice, and they deserve to have a voice, even if it's just saying how much they missed their friends or they miss their teacher. And so, that's really important that they too can reconnect and be part of a community, just enjoy coming back to school. Obviously, there's going to be constraints within that, but we're really pleased that the Minister has trusted us to be flexible enough to allow us to do it in a way that sees fit for our community.
Blistering hot day in Auckland today, Nadi. Couple of things. Have you got cover for the students outside? And what's the rain day plan? Because you know how unpredictable this city is in terms of weather.
Absolutely, and I have to admit we don't have as much cover as we would like, that's for sure. But what I envisage is, because our numbers won't be so, they won't be so big, that what cover we do have will be enough for us while we're there, at this time. But certainly, it's going to be a really interesting time, and I think that's what we're asking our staff to do, is just approach this with a really open mind and let's navigate this together. We're a little bit in unknown territory, but kei te pai, we're navigators. We're navigators historically, so let's bring out all those tools and work our way through this. And what's your vaccination rate looking like for your staff? Well, I'm fortunate enough to have 99% or 98% vaccinated, and one who's not vaccinated is purely because she's got a major operation coming up and just can't afford to have anything go wrong, otherwise she loses her operation date. So she's actually not returning, and we weren't expecting her to return this term. And then she's actually our only teacher. So, I have to admit, I'm very lucky that my staff have got themselves vaccinated, so I'm not faced with with that whole challenge of what will we do if half my staff wasn't. In saying that, my staff are still nervous. Just because we're vaccinated, it doesn't mean that we're not feeling a little bit of nervousness, a bit of anxiousness about what's going on.
Tauke, Nadi, 99% vaccinated. Fantastic to hear. Yeah. Thank you for your kōrero. That is Nadi Leonard, who's the principal there of Jean Batten School. About 400 students. She's expecting about 25% of them to turn up next week. It is 18 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. A congressional investigation into the US Capitol riot has called in 10 more close allies of Donald Trump to give testimony. They include New Zealander and former Deputy Chief of Staff Chris Liddell, former White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, and top advisor Stephen Miller. The probe is looking into their efforts to overturn the election results. CNN's Ryan Nobles has more.
New targets to help uncover who was behind the insurrection, narrowing in on those closest to the former president, Donald Trump. The committee dropping more subpoenas today, 10 new ones, including key players in the Trump orbit in the time between the November election and January 6th. The biggest names: longtime loyal advisor Stephen Miller, body man turned White House personnel chief Johnny McEntee, and former press secretary Kayleigh McEnany. McEnany, one of the loudest voices in Trump's inner circle, peddling the big lie about the election results, both in and outside the White House.
The integrity of our election matters. The Constitution of the United States matters. What we have seen across the country is Democrat officials systematically trying to do an end run around the Constitution to tip the scales of the election in their favor.
This comes just one day after targeting other high-ranking Trump officials, like former campaign manager Bill Stepien, spokesman Jason Miller, and former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who suggested that Trump impose martial law to run the election again in states he lost.
If he wanted to, he could take military capabilities and he could place them in those states and basically rerun an election in each of those states.
The committee also seeking out campaign aide Angela McCollum, who left a voicemail for legislators in Michigan, encouraging them to overturn the election.
You do have the power to reclaim your authority and send a slate of electors that will support President Trump and Vice President Pence.
And the committee still wanting to hear from John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who authored the memo outlining fringe legal theories about former Vice President Mike Pence's authority to overturn election results as part of a pressure campaign.
We know there was fraud, traditional fraud that occurred. We know that dead people voted.
And former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik. All four of them, Stepien, Miller, Eastman, and Kerik, among those gathered at a D.C. hotel for what is described as a war room to overturn the election. Kerik already warning that he does not plan to comply. I will not be threatened, intimidated, forced into bankruptcy, or silenced at the hands of this committee, who are not looking for truth, but targeting patriots and members of the president's legal team that wanted nothing more to investigate and expose those irregularities, Kerik said in a statement. His confrontational tone, an example of the difficult time the committee is having getting Trump allies to cooperate. Their ability to get witnesses to cooperate hinging in part on a decision by the Department of Justice, which is yet to weigh in on a criminal contempt referral of Steve Bannon, who has openly defied a committee subpoena. Attorney General Merrick Garland refusing to shed any light on how the DOJ plans to respond.
We evaluate these in the normal way we do, facts and the law, and applying the principles of prosecution.
The UN has made a gloomy assessment of the progress made so far at the climate summit in Glasgow. The latest emissions cutting pledges are likely to have a minimal effect on temperatures this century. The BBC's David Shookman has more from Scotland.
This is what the talks are all about, keeping the planet safe to live on. Astronaut Tim Peake's come to the conference in Glasgow to spell out the dangers.
Every sunrise and sunset, we see Earth's atmosphere just 16 kilometres thick, and you realise that's it. That's what protects all life down here on the planet. And if we put things into that atmosphere, if for example, wildfires, you see them covering entire continents, and the smoke disperses, and that's when you really appreciate that it doesn't have anywhere else to go. We're all on this one planet together.
But the challenge here at this massive gathering is to get delegates from nearly 200 countries to agree on what to do. to try to slow down the pace of climate change. So after 10 days of talking, what's actually been achieved in terms of heading off the risk of the planet getting hotter? Well, just before the conference started, we were on course for an increase of 2.7 degrees Celsius, a really dangerous prospect. Now, if everyone keeps the promises they've made in recent days, that's come down to something like 1.8 degrees Celsius. But it all depends on everyone keeping their word, and even if they do, that's still above the target of 1.5 degrees. So the problem is far from sorted.
We don't have much time. We want to stay under 1.5, and we're already seeing the climate changing. So now we need to invest. Now we need to protect. We cannot kick this can down the road. It is not something we can do in 2030, 2050. We need to do it in 2021 and 2022.
New extremes of temperature are proving hazardous in many regions already. And a study by Met Office scientists warns that 1 billion people could be affected by a combination of rising heat and humidity. Working outdoors could become almost impossible.
Pfizer has released more data about the safety and effectiveness of its COVID vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds. In New Zealand, vaccines won't be available for younger children until next year. And in Australia, the Chief Medical Officer says there's no big rush as they're not getting seriously ill with COVID. Here's the ABC's Annie Guest in Sydney.
As Australia opens up, the issue of COVID inoculation for 5 to 11-year-olds remains unresolved. But the co-director of virus research at the Westmead Institute, Professor Sarah Palmer, says this trial data should help.
These results from this study are really exciting, and exciting globally, really, because it does provide proof that the vaccine is safe in children, and that also this vaccine will prevent infection in children by COVID-19 in children by 90%. And this is really an impressive number because especially as the world is experiencing a Delta surge.
Pfizer's evaluation of its research is published today in the New England Journal of Medicine after 3 experts independently peer-reviewed the work. It says administering 1/3 of an adult dose was found to be safe and effective in 1,500 young children given 2 vaccinations 3 weeks apart. Professor Palmer again.
I think Australia should move quite quickly forward with accepting this vaccine for children because it will allow children to return to a more normal life, both in school and interacting with their grandparents and their family members.
The government has backed rapid antigen tests for children, young children in schools, while it awaits further data on vaccine trials. Do you think that it need not continue to wait?
Yes, I think this data shows very, very importantly that this vaccine is safe for children.
Staying in Australia, where as restrictions lift, businesses are worried they're about to cop an avalanche of compensation claims from staff who caught COVID while at work. There's already been about 3,000 claims, with the bulk of them in New South Wales and Victoria. Lawyers are warning that those who failed to protect staff could be sued for negligence. Here's the ABC's Rhianna Whitson.
At Stapleton Family Meats in Sydney South, owner Mark Stapleton keeps a sharp eye out for customers who forget their COVID check-in.
You want to do the code there? We've got one right in front of you there.
The Gaimea butcher has been doing everything he can to keep the disease at bay, with staff required to wear masks, get vaccinated and sign a daily declaration that they're well and haven't had contact with anyone carrying the infection.
Any staff member that's been in contact with a family member that's been sick, the staff members stay at home for the day, have a COVID test, so we can try and eliminate any infections within the workplace.
And if that leaves his business short-staffed, well, Mark Stapleton says any unvaccinated job applicants need not apply.
You've got to also consider not only the staff and our customers, we have to consider our staff going home to their family and their children and their elderly parents. So if I was to have a new staff member apply for a job that wasn't willing to be vaccinated, it really would be a deal breaker. Right on the PI there. Anything else today?
And as COVID restrictions ease and public health orders mandating vaccination are scrapped, businesses around the country are expected to be hit by rising numbers of workers' compensation claims by employees infected in the workplace. However, lawyers also warn employers could be sued for negligence if they haven't provided a safe environment for their staff, and that could include failing to ensure all staff are vaccinated. Giri Sivaraman specialises in employment law at Morris Blackburn Lawyers.
And the argument that a worker might make is, well, if you're aware of the risks and you knew that mandating the vaccination was an appropriate and reasonable way to manage that risk, and you should have taken that step, and you didn't, and had you taken that step I wouldn't have got COVID, that might result in a claim.
The Council of Small Business Organisations Australia fears its members could be hit with steep hikes in work cover premiums as millions are paid out to infected workers.
We'll get to your feedback now on schools. We were just talking to Nadi Leonard, who's the principal of Jean Batten School, about 400 students in Mangere East. Her staff, 98 to 99% vaccinated. She's expecting about 25% of kids to turn up next week when they open. Dave from Nelson's got in touch to say big shout out to schools and teachers. I'm always impressed how calmly they tackle each COVID challenge. Oh yeah, we can do that. Their organisational skills are impressive and they just get on and do stuff. Well done and huge thanks, says Dave from Nelson. Thanks for the shout out for them, Dave. Helen's got in touch about vaccines for police and reckons all public services should be mandated to get vaccinated to protect the people that they have to deal with. Others agree, 100% behind it. And someone else says surely the army should be doing the checkpoints and quarantine facilities so police can go back to doing other policing. The late news team are going to keep you updated throughout the night. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up speaks to Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson about Auckland's border. They'll also have the latest on the Black Caps as they seek revenge against England in their T20 World Cup semi-final. Well, they might as well stay up all night. We'll be back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines. I'm Catriona McLeod. The National Party says it's likely parents will become frustrated if children only attend one day of classes when Auckland and Waikato primary schools reopen next week. However, the Green Party says they're still not convinced the decision to reopen is the safest option right now. Taranaki's medical officer of health thinks it's possible positive traces of COVID-19 in wastewater may be linked to a visitor to the area. And the Police Association says resources are under strain in Auckland, with officers being asked to man the city's COVID-19 borders. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Jazz musicians are often interested in the subject of light. So tonight on Inside Out, I've put a show together featuring some of the many different takes on light that you'll find in jazz. Moonlight, twilight, wine light and starlight. Jazz takes on light.